There's no doubt at this point that Tesla's full self-driving technology is on its way to launch a licensed Robotaxi program. How do we know this? Well, this week, Tesla released new data about the safety of their autopilot technology, showing that Tesla drivers using autopilot, which includes full self-driving, are 10 times safer than non-Tesla drivers. But today, we'll show you an analysis that shows that full self-driving alone, which includes city driving, not just highway, by itself is already much safer at just one crash for every 9 to 15 million miles driven. Second, we'll show you exactly where we are in the reliability scale of the March of Nines, and from this, we can estimate when Tesla will get to Robotaxi levels. We have Cern Basher here with us, and he'll show us his research and analysis on this. Welcome, Cern.
Hi, Herbert. It's good to be back.
Thank you for this. We love every time you do deep dive research, you come up with your graphs and tables. And today, which I love about it, is you found a few things that, because you did this analysis, that few know how safe is FSD, supervised FSD by itself, and then how close are we to Robotaxi? I love your March of 9 tables. I think people will appreciate that. So let's start off first with how well is Tesla's full self-driving doing? And we know that 12.5.1.2, the 12.5 series has just shocked people how great it is. But even more shocking, Elon said that we are a clear path to doubling average miles per between interventions in August, this month in August. He says that, and then you put this table together. Tell us what we're looking at here.
Yeah, I wanted to give folks kind of a way to understand some of this. And so I put this table together. So if we look at disengagement rates. If you had one disengagement every 10 miles that you drove, right? And if you drove the average amount that an American drives a year, 14,000 miles, and you drove that evenly every day of the year, 365th of that, then you could have 3.8 disengagements every day. Right? And 1,400 a year, and over a 90-year lifetime, 126,000 disengagements. And then as they improve, if you get down to one disengagement per 100 miles, you're now at less than one a day and 140 a year, and so on. So as you go down this table, you can start to see that the number of disengagements per day goes to zero very quickly. And the number of disengagements per year also drops effectively to zero.
Wow.
But over a 90-year lifetime, if you get to one disengagement per million miles, you're looking at one disengagement during your lifetime. Now,
where do you think we are today based on full self-driving 12.5 per se?
I think it's hard to say. If you look at the information on the community tracker, it's like one disengagement per 300 miles or something like that. Now, the challenge with disengagements is there are a lot of disengagements because people don't like the way that FSD is driving, not because it was dangerous. It's just that they don't like the way the car is behaving, or they don't drive like that. So they disengage. That certainly doesn't mean that it was a safety critical disengagement. So I think right now it's hard to know for sure exactly where FSD is. Only Tesla knows for sure. And it seems like they're expecting some big improvements in the coming weeks and months.
Well, let me ask you that question a separate way then, a different way. What level of disengagement rate would you expect before you would authorize Robotaxi?
Well, if the metric is safer than a human, then we have some data to explore that. And so I think we have a couple of charts coming up where we can more deeply explore that. There's two issues in my mind. One is it safer than a human? And then secondly, from a liability standpoint, from Tesla's perspective, if they were to offer unsupervised FSD, at what level does it make sense before, in order to get the liability down in terms of the lawsuits and the crashes that may result in fatalities? How many legal cases does Tesla want to deal with? That would be absent any kind of immunity, for example, that the government might offer. So I've sort of suggested that as long as FSD is operating at levels that are consistent with being safer than a human, then Tesla should be more or less immune to lawsuits as it relates to that. It's a bit like the drug industry. As long as the drugs and the vaccines are within the expected bounds, of side effects, then it's pretty hard to sue a drug company for money. And I think the same approach may be necessary when it comes to autonomous vehicles. We know that there are going to be some accidents. There always will be. But if the vehicles are operating safer than a human, then we are saving human lives. We're net better off. And so I think for me, those are the two metrics.
Yeah, I love
One
that.
is from a lawsuit standpoint, and then, fundamentally, is it safer than a human?
Thank you for sharing that, because I think that's exactly correct. It's safer than human, which we're going to dive deeper. You've got great analysis on that. This engagement rate is just more for us who are testing it to see if it's progressing or not progressing. But it's not, like you said, there's definition of disengagement that, is a critical disengagement, meaning that it would have gone to an accident versus just, I want to press the accelerator or something like that. But it's a measure of movement. So let's get to safety. And then you have explored whether or not full self-driving supervised is safer than a human already, not just autopilot, which is on the highways. Mm-hmm. So last week we reported quite often now that Tesla dropped their vehicle safety report, and they're saying that not only is Tesla the safest cars in the world, but with this new technology, they're calling it autopilot, which includes both full self-driving and the highway autopilot, that it's already 10 times safer than the average human. Omid Afshar, a Tesla executive, said that they told us this at the last shareholder meeting, that the more than 1.6 billion cumulative miles have been driven with FSD supervised. And then on the vehicle safety, what they discovered now is that in second quarter 2024, one crash for every 6.88 million miles driven, in which they're driving a Tesla that was using autopilots, and regular people driving non-Teslas without that technology, they have one crash every 670,000 miles. So that's 10 times safer than regular humans today. But even if you're just driving a Tesla without using the autopilot at all, it's still double the safety already, or even 2.5 times better. So that was the news. They shared this. This is not terribly helpful because it kind of doesn't show you how it's improved if you compare it to over the years, but it really has significant change. So you said that Tesla's safest vehicles on the planet, and then you shared this table.
Yeah, so I put it within the construct of the disengagement chart that I showed earlier, but now I'm talking about accident rates. Mm-hmm. So one accident per 10 miles, for example, you'd have almost 4 accidents a day, for example, if you were driving an average of 14,000 miles a year. So obviously that would not be acceptable, and obviously that's not where we are today. Mm-hmm. The blue numbers in the middle are the numbers that are being reported. So a manually driven Tesla, for every million miles that are driven manually in a Tesla, there's 0.69 accidents. The national average that Tesla's using is 1.5, essentially, accidents per million miles. Mm-hmm. Right. So what's interesting is that you should expect no accidents in a day and no accidents in a year. But over a 90-year life, the difference there is 2 accidents in a lifetime versus only 1 in a Tesla. So that's a pretty nice improvement right there.
Huge improvement. It sounds small, big 2 accidents in 9 years, but the reality is the number of people driving, the number of cars out there, it's translates to 400,000 deaths per year. It translates to 2-3 million accidents per year. So in the U.S. alone. So this is how it translates. Yeah, it's going to cut it in half if you drive Teslas.
And then to take it a step further with Tesla with autopilot, that basically is 0.15 per million or 1.5 per 10 million miles driven. Mm-hmm. All right, so that's a 10x improvement over the national average. And that translates into 0.2 accidents in a 90-year lifetime. So obviously, the fewer accidents that you're in, the less likely you are to have a fatality, an injury, and the expense, frankly, of fixing the vehicles. So it's in everybody's interest to drive these numbers down as low as possible.
Yeah, and that's the current level of safety today. It's like an ADAS system that you're adding to your car the car also keeps me safe. We know that already. The safest cars in the world is our Teslas. And then you got this ADAS technology. So even if it's supervised, I don't get why people are upset. It's got this in-cabin camera. It's looking at me. If I'm looking away, it knows. If I'm looking at my phone, it knows, and it beeps me. But it helps me drive my car better. So even just what it is today, and it's only going to get better. And you're going to share with us how fast it's going to get better. So this is what you said, right? Why would you put your family at risk, especially now that the cost of a Tesla is on par with or cheaper than ICE vehicles?
And this is independent of whether FSD is ever solved. Yeah. Even if FSD is only ever just supervised, the savings in lives is material. Right. And that was the point there, is why would you subject your family to the risk of being in an accident? If you could reduce that by a factor of 10, that's the smart thing to do. Right. Okay. If there's ever a place to not cut corners, that would be one.
It's a big one. I love these two slides you created. Tell us what we're looking at.
Well, the data that Tesla reports is on a quarterly basis. And so the thing to do is to really smooth it out and look at a rolling 12-month period.
Nice.
Because when you look at quarterly, you've got winter months and then summer months. Seasonality in it. So this smooths it out. And you can see that the green line, which is the miles with autopilot, excuse me, has gone from 3 times safer up to about 7 times. I'm sorry, 6. This is not safer. This is millions of miles per accident. So 3 million miles before there's an accident, up to almost 7 million miles before there's an accident.
6.5, yeah.
6.8, I think it is, yeah.
I see.
Oh, sorry, the 12-month average is close to 6.5, yes. So over the last 5 years, the safety of a Tesla with autopilot has essentially doubled.
Wow. I love it.
Now, and we'll see this in a second, but that's on very, very few cars that actually have driven very many FSD miles. FSD miles have only just started to ramp up recently.
Okay, so this is like all Teslas, but that's only because of only a few is already moving this up.
It's starting
to. Every Tesla has this, it's going to just automatically skyrocket.
Yeah, look at the bump there in the last 2 quarters. You can see it starting to bump up. And that's because we now have more FSD miles, and we'll see this here in a second.
Yeah.
It's starting to have an impact, but we're still in the early days of that impact, but it's already quite material.
My point too is that, look, this is the US average. And so why are you stopping technology? If you leave everything alone, it'll just stay like that forever. And here you go. You can increase the miles driven before an accident and just keep working on it. Keep making it better. All right, what's this one?
Okay, so this is actually looking at the ratio of the two. So you've gone from Teslas with autopilot / FSD being 6 times safer than the US average to now being almost 10 times safer. Right. So just the improvement in the last 5 years is quite staggering.
Wow.
And again, this is before we start to see any real impact from FSD, and I'll show you why in a second.
Nice. Okay. So Elon already said FSD will be much safer than humans. I mean, he's saying will be, but it is already safer than humans, is what you are able to say now. And then at some point, FSD and technology will be superhuman. So it's we're already there, and that's why I don't understand still. Okay, so this is the point you just made, which is FSD might already be a lot safer than we think. And you took the data that they shared, and you were able to discover that they really did. Do you want to explain what you did?
Yeah, so I think there's a general misunderstanding about the data that Tesla's reporting. And Tesla is not really helping us too much with this because of the terminology that they're using. They talk about the cumulative miles driven on autopilot. But what I really think it's cumulative miles on autopilot, including FSD.
It is, yeah.
Right. And Omid, in his beginning of his post, mentioned right at the beginning how many FSD miles there is.
Yeah.
If FSD was not part of it, then why would he even mention it? It's got nothing to do with the data if FSD is not part of the data. Right. And so looking at that yields some interesting things when we factor in FSD. Herbert, I'm not sure if you have the cumulative FSD miles slide. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the little inset box there is what Tesla showed in their second quarter earnings report. And I took that data and graphed out this line. So the line that you see below is exactly the same as what Tesla reported, but I have the numbers there that I can work with. And so basically what you're seeing with this line is that before, let's say, Q1 of 2023, the cumulative FSD miles were tiny.
Yeah.
Right. And they've only recently begun to ramp up. And just in the last quarter, we had an increase of 600 million miles in one quarter. Now, 600 million miles sounds like a lot. But when you consider the mileage that Tesla's fleet is doing in a given quarter, it's actually pretty small. Right. So if you think about this, then the increase that we're seeing in Tesla's safety numbers, if they are being driven by FSD, if FSD is still a small percentage of the total fleet miles, then that tells you that the safety of FSD is phenomenal, because if the small percentage is having that much of an impact on the total,
yes,
then the safety of that small number must be big. And so I'm trying to calculate that here, and we'll get to that number.
Yeah, and you can extrapolate this, that what happens if every Tesla is using FSD, and for every drive that they do, just that alone should already show you significant jump in safety.
That's right. Right. So with the number of vehicles that are in Tesla's fleet, well, first of all, this is the FSD miles driven each quarter. So I'm taking the data then from that previous chart. And I think if you just show the next chart, you can see the quarterly FSD miles. And last quarter, it exploded to about 600 million. But prior to that, it was, 100, 200, maybe close to 300 million. And before those last 4 quarters, it was much, much lower.
This is everybody trying out 12.5, right? They're like going, oh my God, this is such a huge leap forward. And then they keep using it. And then they're just everybody. So that alone is already a 3 times increase just because of that 12.3 to 12.5.
That's right. So we only really have 1 quarter so far of this massive increase in FSD miles, but the impact on the safety data was interesting. Okay. So now I wanted to calculate the total number of miles that Tesla's fleet are doing, right? So if there's more than 6 million vehicles in the fleet, and let's say we know that on average people drive 14,000 miles a year, I can calculate how many miles that is per quarter, right? Now, we also have to make some assumptions about how many vehicles are actually using or engaging autopilot technology. And I don't know the number for sure. For this analysis, I used what I thought was a very conservative number of 25%.
Well, so that's the problem, right? Autopilot is every car has it, but FSD, we don't know what the take rate is. It could be sub 10%. Yeah. But if you just take 25%, which I actually don't have that problem, because I think that FSD 12.5 is so good now that it's now something that we're going to see it. We'll see the jump. And if it's not 12.5, 12.6 will do it. 12.7 will do it. 13 will certainly do it. We'll get to 25% pretty easily, I think.
So if we assume only 25%, then we're approaching, or we've gone past 5 billion miles per quarter on autopilot / FSD. We already know the FSD number last quarter was 600 million of that 5 billion. Okay, but 600 million out of 5 billion is still a pretty small percentage. Right? So I'm trying to narrow in here, how much of an impact are the FSD miles component having on the total miles traveled on autopilot plus FSD? Tesla's giving us aggregated data, and I'm trying to disaggregate it to narrow in on what FSD might be showing us. Yeah. Right. So last quarter, then FSD accounted for about 12% of the total fleet miles. Right. And that's up from, very low levels. Now, this graph mirrors very nicely the FSD miles, and you would expect it to. If FSD miles have gone up so much, then the percentage of the total fleet miles would also go up. But even at 12%, it's still a fairly small number in terms of the total miles traveled in the quarter. Okay. So with these building blocks, now I did some math to figure out what the new crash numbers might be. Right? And over the last year, the average has been about 1 crash for every 9 million miles. And if I look at the last 2 or 3 quarters, it's closer to 15, closer to almost 20 million miles.
Wow. Doubled it.
Yeah. So again, I'm trying to be conservative in putting some numbers out there. There's a lot of uncertainty about, how to actually calculate this.
Yeah.
But I think it is pretty clear to me that if you can isolate FSD, supervised FSD, it's materially making Teslas safer. Again, over and above autopilot features. And we're just starting to see that now in the Tesla's quarterly safety numbers.
Okay, this is supervised FSD. Like I'm saying, why are we not giving that credibility? I love that Elon is in every time that he's actually been interviewed, he's been talking about how FSD, supervised FSD, should be a demand driver. It should drive sales of Teslas as soon as people start realizing that this thing is going to make you 10 times safer than a regular car, or even 2 times safer than Teslas. So why not? This is a gorgeous table you put together here. I love it. What is it telling me?
Yeah. So again, building on what we've looked at previously with the blue in the middle and the red with what was reported. Yeah. Now I'm adding the yellow, which is a little hard to see here, but it's the second line on the bottom.
Oh, wait, down here. Gotcha.
Yep. And so now I'm looking at Tesla with supervised FSD. This is just FSD by itself.
I can read it here. Okay. That's what I asked you earlier.
Okay. Sorry. Yep. So here it is.
Yeah.
So that has improved now from Tesla with autopilot, which is again autopilot plus FSD.
Wait.
At 1.5 crashes per 10 million miles. If I isolate FSD out right now, over the last 12 months, I think the number is more like 0.83 crashes per 10 million miles. So it's about twice as safe as autopilot plus FSD. Supervised FSD by itself is twice as safe as that. So again, putting it in terms of a human life, 0.1 crashes over a 90-year life as opposed to 0.2. So we've cut the accident rate in half already.
Can you, and I don't think you can, but can you take that disengagement rate data, project it out? When can you get FSD, not supervised, get to this level? Because it seems to me that if not supervised FSD, which is autonomy at this point, if it can get to this 1 per 10 million, you are Robotaxi ready.
There would be no doubt. There'd be no doubt if unsupervised FSD was at level, it would be well beyond Robotaxi ready.
So how do you get FSD unsupervised to be the same as FSD supervised? So how do we eke that out?
That's a good question. Tesla, no doubt, has the data on that. And so far, they have not shared that. I don't know
they don't need to share it, sir. They don't need to share it. You can dig it and find out.
Well, that's what we'll try to do. Yeah. Every now and then they give us a few little breadcrumbs to work with.
You discover these things. This is gorgeous. This is great. Okay. I'm glad that you broke out FSD supervised. But the beautiful thing you discovered here is FSD supervised is even safer than autopilot. The reason why that's important, let me explain it, is that everybody kept saying autopilot, which is on highways. Nothing happens on a highway. It's straightaways. It's a little curve here, a little curve there. It's, it's much easier to not have accidents on a highway because nothing's happening. You're all going straight versus, people walking and dogs and buses and all these things happening, construction zones. There should be more accidents in a city. But what you've shown here is that FSD supervised in city streets is actually double the safety of autopilot.
It appears that it could be. Yeah. Again, I want to be careful about the statements. I did have to make an assumption about the percentage of vehicles in the fleet with autopilot or FSD engaged. If it's more than 25%, then FSD is even safer than the numbers I'm showing here.
Yeah.
If it's less than 25%, then it's not quite as safe.
I think it's less, right? I mean, just to be conservative, my guess is 8%.
Good question.
That's
I don't
point.
have a good beat on what the percentage would be. I was
Of
trying to be
adoption.
conservative with 25. Again, it depends on what Tesla is counting as autopilot and whether it's engaged or not. But yeah, I think we're in the ballpark. It's in, it's close.
All right. That is fantastic information there. We need to keep track of that. This is the March of Nines, and disengagements per rate is doubling. We're not saying that we're near, as you pointed out that first table. We're still very far away, like 1 in 100, 1 in 200 miles. We need to get to 10,000 miles and all that. So that's gonna show up. But in terms of safety, that's the critical thing. If you can at least show that supervised is safer, at least we know that the NHTSA and other government should not stop this supervised test of FSD. That should be like the last thing they do, stop it.
Absolutely. And to your point, a nice demand driver for Tesla should be supervised FSD.
Yeah.
Right. It's very clear that is making the vehicles even safer than what Tesla is currently reporting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So market it, tell people about it. And that's why we did this show. Thank you so much for diving deep into this information and sharing your tables. They're all beautiful and they're all very insightful. Thank you, Cern.
My pleasure.
Yeah, follow Cern on X at Cern Basher, and you will see every single post he does these kind of deep dives. Appreciate you, Cern. Thank you.
Thanks, Herbert.
I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.